All right, so in our previous video, we talked about Kotter Step 1 and 2, create a sense of urgency and build a coalition. So the next step after that, develop your strategy and communicate your vision. And this makes total sense for this to actually happen after you've built your coalition, because having a guiding coalition will hopefully influence both your strategy and your vision. So let's explore step 3, develop your strategy. So strategy eats passion for breakfast, and so it's really important to map out early what that's going to look like. For many of you in this group, we've been talking about rebuilding a simulation program after COVID kind of wiped out the department's education. So let's use that as a little bit of a worked example. So having a strategy is going to have multiple components. What does your simulation intervention look like? What frequency will it be? What time will it be? Are the sims educational? Or are they diagnostic? Or are they interventional? Who's going to attend? What sort of staff are going to facilitate? And how will you record attendance? Will you be documenting latent safety threats? And do you have enough faculty to have some kind of systemic resilience if someone is sick or unrosted on that particular day? Another component is actually going to be a curriculum. So what are the topics that you actually want to cover? And this really deserves co-design input from your coalition. There are way too many in situ programs in particular which are designed for one craft group. And in particular, there are kind of multiple publications describing departmental simulation programs that are really just about medical learning objectives or designed to support one group. And this is really important to avoid because there is a special place in hell for simulationists who design multi-professional scenarios where nurses are there as props for discussions about medical leadership. It's not respectful, it's not meaningful education for nursing staff, and it doesn't promote understanding or mutual respect if we prioritize one stream's agenda at the expense of everyone else's. So the best way forward is really to co-create early with your team. And if you've arranged a guiding coalition like we talked about in step 2, then you will have some great people to bounce ideas off of. And they can help point out errors or flaws in your thinking, or tunnel visioning based on your individual experience of being in one healthcare team. You might also like to think about how will you measure success? How many sims do you expect to deliver over the course of your term? What sort of barriers do you think might come up? And you also need to think about when you shouldn't do a simulation. So do you need no-go criteria for your clinical space so they can cancel education if needed? It can also really empower your team if you do that to insist that you can roll out ahead with education when those no-go criteria aren't met, but there's still some hesitation or reluctance. So in summary, for step 3, co-design your program, utilize your allies to troubleshoot your goals, and be prepared to flex it up if things aren't working early on. Which brings us to step 4, communicate your vision. So this step is really about synthesis and organizational change. If we take a step back, we need to think about organizational change in general. So in his book, Diffusion of Innovation, Everett Rogers describes how organizational change moves slowly through the people within that group. He describes 5 adopter types: innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And each of these groups has a different tolerance and enthusiasm for new ideas. And your goal will be to harness those innovatives and early adopters first so they can influence the early majority and then the late majority and then hopefully the laggards. So why is this important for our sim program? Well, at different stages of rollout, you might put different emphasis and emotional energy into different individuals in your organization. Don't go straight for the laggards. That'll be a lot of emotional effort for very little gain. But if you have simulation enthusiasts in your department already, or people who are genuinely passionate about a particular clinical problem, then you should lean in and start chatting with them about your program early and how that is going to look. At the same time, if you do have vocal laggards in your organization or people who just really object to stuff, don't just write them off. Consider what they're saying as very useful data, because they may be describing very real barriers to departmental engagement that are worth considering about and planning for early. You also might need to think about your branding. What are you calling your program? How does it fit within your service? Does it make your service look good? And you might like to think about how you will communicate that. So you could use an infographic, a podcast, or a flyer to promote it, starting up and building enthusiasm. Is there a particular regular meeting where you could present for a couple of minutes just to highlight that this is coming up and encourage people to attend? You also might need to do, in some places, a formal proposal, which can be really boring to write, but it also makes you look into the nitty-gritty of how things are actually going to work and plan for that. So that's Kotter's first steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 for organizational change, and we are halfway through. Let me know what you think.